So happy to welcome everyone to our Dauntless LeadHERship Podcast today and to invite a group of talented young professional women from diverse walks of life, many of whom I've known for a very long time, to talk frankly about their take on working, on work-life balance, and on leadership and how to become a leader. I feel privileged to have them all with us, and we're going to talk today about those topics and more. For those of you who are joining us on Dauntless for the first time, please don't forget to download and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify or Apple, or to see us as a webinar on YouTube via dauntless.works. That's dauntless.works. That's our URL. So welcome, everybody. I'm happy you're here. And I'm going to ask each of you to just introduce yourself by saying your name, what do you currently do, a little bit about how you got there, and now, what does Dauntless mean to you? So the way I see you all on camera is starting with Lauren. So Lauren, can I ask you to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation today. So I'm coming from Fannie Mae. So I work in a strategy capacity. My team focuses on AI strategy and generative AI strategy for the full enterprise. But I'll talk a little bit more about some other organizations that I'm a part of. So really excited for the conversation, and just want to preface that any of the opinions I express do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the entities that I represent.
Thank you, Lauren. And where do you work geographically? Where do you live, and how did we meet?
Yeah, sure. So that'll be the fun part. So I'm based out of Northern Virginia, so considered part of the DMV area. And Lisa, you and I met because I'm also one of the council members for Dublin City University Alumni Council. And so we recently signed an MOU, congratulations, with Rutgers University. So we held a huge session, and there were a couple of extended partnerships. And one of the workshops that we met focused on women's leadership as well. So that was back in maybe November now.
Thanks. And are you a millennial? Are you a Gen Zer? And tell me what Dauntless means to you.
Sure. So I am a millennial, and Dauntless, I've heard this so many times throughout my entire life in different ways, but for me, it means being fearless. I think that it really stands out in terms of, all the obstacles we face, especially as women, and how we overcome adversity or the capabilities that we sort of strengthen in the face of those obstacles.
Hi, my name's Alexis Holder, and I don't know where to begin, but I met Lisa as a senior in college, where I had been going to Lisa's events to just really create like case competitions for young women in college and connect them with industry professionals, where I've met so many people over at that time. But Lisa actually helped me get through the doors at L'Oreal. So that's where I started off my career after college. And now I'm at Unilever on Dove soap doing global marketing. So it's been a good time. I agree with what Lauren said. Anything I say represents my voice and not the company's. That was very smart, Lauren. And yeah, that's really it.
Thank you, Alexis. And Dauntless.
Yes. Dauntless to me, similar to Lauren, means being fearless, but more than anything, not being afraid to walk alone. I think as women in general, we often have to make big decisions. And I think group mentality is very much alive and well. So I think the fearlessness really comes in the most when you have no one rooting for you or supporting you, and you really have to step into that light and hope for the best.
Thanks. And without asking your age, I'm not going to ask anybody's age. What generation do you represent?
I am in Generation Z.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Look forward to learning more about each of you and have this conversation. I currently work for Target in a strategy and operations role. But actually started my career in sports media. So have a background still in strategy and operations, but made a bit of a career pivot in joining the retail world a few years ago. I'm based just outside of New York City. And Dauntless, to me, would agree with what Alexis and Lauren have already said. I think for me, I think it's also kind of a lens of like undeterred by risk. So you move forward with the best judgment, decision, knowing that you've done the work or put in the work to, put your best foot forward, and kind of doing so confidently and, focused on the positives that can come from that courage.
I love that. Put your best foot forward. And what generation are you, Danielle?
I'm a millennial.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allie. I've known Lisa for about 30 years. And I am currently a vocational rehabilitation counselor for the state. So I help individuals with disabilities gain employment and maintain employment. I also had a couple of career pivots. I was started at Neutrogena, Johnson & Johnson in business. My mom helped me get there. And I realized it was not a fit for me. And I wanted to be in more of a helping role. So I transitioned to speech therapy. And now I am doing vocational counseling. I'm a millennial, and I am going to echo what everybody said. It means being fearless. But I think a big part of it is not just being fearless, but actually it's okay if you are fearful and doing it anyway.
Everyone, my name is Maya Ben David. I am an associate manager of corporate events and marketing for a business services company. So I manage all my companies like corporate events, industry events, and trade shows. I also play a role in the marketing and promotion of the events. I started my career at Johnson & Johnson as well in one of their self-care brands, Kenvue, or self-care brands called Zarbee's. And while I was there, I really started to find a passion in like project-oriented work and project management. So I have my certification of associate project management, and that's where I really started to develop a passion for events and project-oriented work. And that, along with my network, Lisa being a huge part of that, helped me land my current role. I am Generation Z.
So we have two Zs and millennials so far. And Jamie, you're going to fall into millennial, yes?
Yes, proud millennial rounding out. So is it my turn?
It's your turn.
I am a physician. I practice rheumatology in an academic setting. I also have a teaching role in Rutgers School of Medicine. And I was very lucky actually to have found a field that really clicked well with my personality. Dauntless to me means actually a lot more, obviously, of agreeing with everyone else's thoughts. But for me personally, I think staying true to yourself and even your past self, maybe things that you really had outlined as important things. And as I grow in my career, I still see myself as junior and early in it, but just kind of remembering what brought me into this particular field. And just kind of not letting that detray from what I want to be to deliver the best care actually I can.
That's great. And I like that being true to yourself as part of Dauntless. I haven't heard that yet. And every time I hear definitions, I hear something new. As our listeners can hear or viewers can see, I've selected friends and family to be part of today's podcast because I know they'll speak frankly. And for anyone who didn't mention it, none of our points of view represent our companies or organizations. There are personal points of view, but I think they matter a lot. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions. I'm trying to help emerging leaders become leaders. And one of the ways I know to do that is to share stories from other people. And here we have a bunch of great other people to share stories. Do any of you want to share a story about a leadership role model or things that you've learned recently about leadership that you think would be beneficial to others, mostly women, but that's not everyone? Okay, Lauren.
I have a mentor. I had this mentor since I was an undergrad at Rutgers. And I met her through a summer internship partnership that we had with Con Edison in New York. And even at that time, she was very senior in the company. And I'll never forget, like, she made herself very approachable but accessible if I had any questions. And one of the main reasons why we've had such a long-standing sort of friendship at this point is because as she grew through her career, she made sure that she was staying in contact with me. We had regular meetups, and she helped me understand like what opportunities are out there. So one of the things I learned from her throughout my career was that when you volunteer yourself to become a mentor, regardless of what position you hold, you, especially the woman, have the opportunity to bring others along. But there's no sense of being untouchable. She always made sure that she was accessible, and I could just talk very candidly with her. So I think that's one of the things that I try to emulate as I grow in my mentorship role as well. So
one of my mentors was actually more of an ally, a man. There were not a lot of women in leadership roles when I started out in marketing. And he gave me some really good advice and said, I'm here if you want advice, and I will stay with you throughout your career. And he did. Lots of folks were not willing to do that. Some of the advice he gave me back in the day were things like, if you learn something, you read a lot and you learn something, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with people that would appreciate it, that might not have had time to read the article, in this case, see the video. We didn't see videos back then, and forward it along and let them know that you're thinking of them and that this is something you've learned. And to this day, that's something I do for people above me, laterally and below. And that's a piece of advice I'd give up to all of you. If you're an avid reader, if you discover something, if you see something in an airport that you think somebody might like to know about, send it along. It's so easy to do right now. This whole podcast stems from the idea that I thought I wanted to learn more about how to help young people become great leaders. So I would ask lots of great leaders, and they all said yes, they'd come on the podcast. And I think that if you ask somebody that you admire, that you don't take advantage, you carefully plan out what you're going to do as a mentee, you will be pleasantly surprised that they'll say yes to you.
There's really not a lot of mentorship emphasis, and there's just kind of, sometimes it can be very siloed to be in healthcare or in a helping role. Especially if, I'm sure Jamie can probably talk about billing, but when I was in the schools working with kids, you should be working with kids, and that's what you should be doing. And there wasn't a lot of time or any time cut out for working with your colleagues or growth. And that was kind of done on your own time. Maybe that's true in business too. I don't know, but it seems like maybe there's more emphasis on it, and there's more reward for it. That's just something I
feel that is true in healthcare, that it's harder to spend time with a mentor because everything has to be built out in healthcare.
Yeah, I can definitely provide some perspective, especially coming in an institution, a teaching institution of all things, so very academic. I do think that it's important for organizations to have that, we call it academic, maybe growth sort of administrative time, and that really has to be something that is built into your contract usually. Otherwise, the needs of the institution will probably be to deliver the services that you were licensed to do. So in Allie's case, I'm sure in your prior role, was to work with the kids and for me to do the patient care. So I think that is one challenge, certainly, that Leaders Up could really be a little bit more attuned to, just kind of knowing that, in addition to being new in our fields, growing our career, and also trying to balance, these kind of career identities, it can be a lot in a new place.
I was just going to add, a lot of my career, I have been an individual contributor, and frankly, a lot of my leaders are in senior leadership positions, and so I can relate a lot to some of the things that you're mentioning, Allison, of like not always necessarily working in a team, right? You kind of go off, do your work. You're maybe working with a client one-on-one or in smaller groups of people. And so I know something that I try to do the best I can always be better, but a tip that I got from a peer of mine was when you are in a presentation or you do have a moment where you are presenting to leaders or maybe working with different leaders or clients, kind of like proactively reaching out for feedback or to like start that conversation. It doesn't always have to be as formal as a, hey, will you be my mentor and guide me over long periods of time or anything like that. And so, for me, I've been able to kind of find mentorship through some of those smaller relationships that I'm able to build.
I know Alexis is not shy to ask for help. She found me through connections and asked, and I applaud that. And so just reminding all of you, ask in little ways if you're not comfortable asking in big ways, like Danielle said, but ask. Go ahead, Alexis.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to talk about, Lisa. I think for me, mentorship means more asking in little ways. I think it's very few I see as like my mentor for life, but Lisa's been pretty consistent in my life. But for most people, I think I am someone who loves to network. Like every event Lisa would host at Johnson & Johnson, I would probably network with 15 people. I just really like to speak. Well, I'm very chatty, Kathy. So for me, it's like a conversation and meeting people. But I think on formal mentorship in the marketing CPG realm, what I've noticed, I think, is people have very limited time. So even there are mentors that have been in my life who we've hit it off immediately. They're so great, but almost rescheduling is exhausting a lot of times. So I think it's hard because I feel like I've had mentors in my life who I know if I can reach them, they're there and they're willing to dedicate the time. But I think a lot of times it's really hard to reach people and just everyone's busy. And now as a mentor, I completely understand it. So I think something I've realized is if you don't consistently reach out and consistently ask or say, I actually need to speak to you, I don't think mentors always realize. Peer mentorship, I will say, has been something that's super beneficial to me because I've realized peer mentors often more than anyone else are willing to like drop everything to speak to you immediately because I think because they're going through the process, they really are willing to hear you out and talk as long as they need to. And I even have one friend who's very close. He will send me like CEOs of different companies and will be like, here's a Black woman I think you'd like. And that type of mentorship is almost something so different because it's consistent. It's not occasional. It's really whenever I want to chat, we'll just catch up and career just comes into it more naturally.
As a boomer, something that's been really a challenge for me is thinking about the work family, the work-life balance, and younger generation. Something I really admire about you all, but I also struggle a little bit with is work to live, not live to work. Is that right? And looking at your holistic life as opposed to feeling like you have to get in the trenches and put in the time so eventually you can reap the rewards. So I admire it, but it's not how I grew up, and I imagine not how a lot of your management grew up. So I want to talk a little bit about that and how do you get the balance you need, but still demonstrate that you're totally committed to your job? Because I think that's important and gets even more important when we have the back to office challenges that we'll hopefully talk about in a minute. Maya, will you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that's so variable based on the person, based on the industry. Like, I think the idea of getting in the trenches and working long hours is sometimes can be normal in like some business industries, finance, law, things like that. And depending on the individual, like I have friends they have that kind of, I call it a grind mentality. Whereas I also have plenty of peers that, think of their job as a means to live and value, their personal lives and closing the computer at 5 p.m. And so I think it's really it depends on the individual.
I think it's a healthy balance of sort of demonstrating a little bit why, like, unfortunately, you kind of have to prove why that should be more of a priority, where it's life-work balance instead of work-life. And one of the things that I've noticed is that, especially since the pandemic, more and more people are trying to make an effort into pouring into themselves in new ways. And it's not just, hey, I want to log off to go to like a workout class, which is still very important. It's more like, in order for me to be my best self, to perform to a higher standard, or to ensure that I'm progressing and I can pour into my team, I'd like to take up educational opportunities, or I need to attend this conference. So it's a lot of those things don't necessarily fit into the frame of, okay, I'm online, I'm working, I'm in meetings. These are extra things that we do to pour into ourselves, which indirectly do benefit ourselves as employees. In order to move in a positive direction, we need to continue to have conversations like this, and then integrate some level of, saying, hey, this is why this is important that I have this time. But it's a very fine line to walk between having to defend your personal time and just showing up as your best self.
Well, and I don't want it to be having to defend, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking for me. What I know that people who work for or with me sometimes probably feel like they have to defend because that's the way that I did it. But that's not necessarily right. Any other thoughts on that? People in corporate America in specific, Danielle, Alexis?
Yeah, I mean, I would really double down on Lauren's point of, something that I was told actually when I was looking to make a bit of a career pivot, was like really thinking critically about like what is most important to you at this time. And it won't always be the same thing, right? So, when I was looking for a change, was it for money? Was it for that work-life balance and having more flexibility? It could be various things. But I just love that piece of advice, because I do feel like sometimes, and maybe this is even just as women, like there's sometimes is a guilt with leaning into maybe one space more than another. And so, that was just a piece of advice that I love. And I love that's something that you see as well, Lauren.
So we have so much great content from our discussion with our Gen Z and Millennial panel that we're going to make it into 2 episodes. And our next episode will cover topics like going back into the office and how to inspire the younger generations as a leader. I'm looking forward to sharing more with you. And I want to end this episode with a great big thank you for our panel, and also the immortal words of my mom, Arlene Barnett, who reminded us that you don't have to know what you're going to be when you grow up, just what you want to do next. See you next time on Dauntless Leadership.